Imagine this. It's 1947, and the bitter winds of the Arctic Circle are blowing with a ferocity that could freeze you to your very bones. But far from being a desolate wasteland, this frozen expanse holds a strange, almost impossible secret. In the middle of this unforgiving ice, the U.S. military is about to perform a task that seems like something out of science fiction, a fully functioning air base built on nothing but ice. And they're going to do it in just 10 days. The place? Greenland. The time? Winter. The mission? Operation Iceworm. If you've never heard of it, that's because it's one of the most bizarre and lesser-known feats in military history. But what's even more shocking, it wasn't some grand orchestrated plan. It started out as a desperate gamble. The year is 1947. The world is still reeling from the aftermath of World War II, and the Cold War is slowly starting to take shape. America is in a race against the Soviet Union for global dominance, and control of the Arctic becomes more important by the day. If the Soviets gain a foothold in the Arctic, it could change the balance of power. Now, imagine you're Major General William P. Smith, an engineer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and you've just been given an impossible task. Build an air base, but here's the catch. It has to go on ice. Not just any ice, moving ice, the kind that shifts and cracks at the slightest disturbance, and you got 10 days to make it work. You stand at the edge of the ice shelf, looking out over miles of white. No infrastructure, no protection, just miles and miles of frozen tundra. It's cold, it's remote, but your mission doesn't care. Neither do the soldiers, who are already unloading gear in preparation. And that's when you realize there's no turning back. You have to make this work. The stakes are too high. But how do you build an air base in the middle of nowhere on ice that might crack at any moment? How do you get planes in and out and keep them operational when everything around you is constantly shifting beneath your feet? Stay tuned, because the story of how they pulled it off might just change everything you thought you knew about ingenuity and courage under pressure. The clock is ticking. The harsh winds of the Arctic don't care about deadlines, and neither do the unpredictable ice flows. Still, Major General William P. Smith and his team are all in. The odds are stacked against them, but they've been trained to handle impossible situations, and yet no amount of training had prepared them for what they were about to face. In the early days, everything goes wrong. The ice is thinner than expected, cracking under the weight of the heavy equipment they've just flown in. The landing strip is nothing but a rough patch of ice, barely wide enough for a single aircraft to land safely. Yet, by some miracle, the first plane touches down, its wheels screeching on the frozen surface. A collective sigh of relief echoes through the camp. But it's short-lived. The first real test comes when a plane returns from a reconnaissance flight and reports that the ice beneath them is starting to shift. This isn't just a small crack. The ice is moving, large sections of it drifting away from the base. A disaster in the making. Major General Smith and his engineers have to make a crucial decision. Do they reinforce the base and hope for the best, or do they abandon it entirely? They can't afford to evacuate the operation. It's too important. So they decide to take a gamble. Enter Captain James Mitchell, a civil engineer and the youngest officer on the team, who proposes a radical solution. Instead of reinforcing the base from above, why not build the airfield into the ice? Essentially, the ice itself would become the foundation of the entire operation. It's an insane idea, but desperate times call for desperate measures. With nothing to lose, they begin to carve into the ice, using explosives to anchor large steel beams and creating an entire infrastructure that's rooted in the shifting landscape. The team works around the clock, racing against time as their only real enemy, nature, continues to shift the ground beneath their feet. Meanwhile, the temperature plummets, reaching lows that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. Equipment breaks down. The planes aren't flying as expected. Everyone's morale is beginning to crack, just like the ice beneath them. And then, out of nowhere, a plane, a B-17 bomber, approaches the base, the first to land since the crisis began. As it touches down, the entire camp holds its breath. The landing is smooth. The base is holding, for now. But the real question still hangs in the air. How much longer will they have before the ice gives way completely? The tension on the ice becomes unbearable. The engineers and soldiers at the base are working around the clock, but with each passing hour, they know they're walking a razor's edge. A break in the ice, a shift too far, and it could all collapse in an instant. Tens of millions of dollars in equipment, not to mention the lives of those who are depending on it. And yet, in the face of this imminent threat, the operation is somehow still functioning. But the question that's been looming over the entire operation finally comes to a head. As the days go by, the ice beneath them begins to crack in a way that can't be ignored. The base is moving, and not in the direction they planned. The engineers gather in a hastily constructed command tent, voices hushed, knowing that their next decision could be the one that forces them to abandon everything. Then, in a moment of grim realization, Major General Smith makes a decision. Instead of pulling the plug, they'll have to reinforce the base one last time, permanently. They've already anchored the airfield into the ice, but now they need to stabilize it further. The solution? A series of massive pressure pads. They're crude, makeshift, and barely functional by most standards. But in the desperate situation, it's the best they've got. The pads would evenly distribute the weight of the equipment, the planes, and any additional structures, reducing the risk of further cracks and shifts. But here's where the story truly flips. You'd expect a scene of despair as these men work in the face of impending collapse. Instead, they dig deeper, not just for ice, but for hope. They're working side by side with an intensity that can't be described, driven by a singular belief that against all odds, they will make this work. It's not just military grit. It's the raw human will to succeed, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. And then the breakthrough comes. As they finish anchoring the last of the pressure pads, the ice stops shifting. The base is no longer at the mercy of nature. For the first time since they landed, the engineers can breathe. The planes can land and take off with relative security. Their floating airbase has become a reality. But there's a twist. Just as they're celebrating the first sign of success, word comes down from higher up. The mission has changed. The airbase is no longer just a symbol of American ingenuity. It's a strategic launch point, a new theater of operations, one that will see more planes flying over enemy territory in the coming months. In their fight against the Soviets, this base has just become a pivotal piece of the puzzle. As Major General Smith looks out over the runway, with planes taking off and landing in perfect synchronization, He's struck by the irony. They'd built a base on ice, a place where nothing should have stood. And yet, here they are, with something that might just shift the balance of the Cold War forever. It's as if they've defied nature itself. But one question remains. Now that they've pulled it off, will the base hold? And even if it does, what other unseen dangers still lurk in the shadows? The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of triumph. The base, now fully operational, stood as a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Against all odds, planes came and went, their engines roaring across the ice, proving that a world-class airbase could indeed be built on a shifting, unpredictable foundation. But the victory was bittersweet. The ice was always moving, always threatening to pull the entire operation under. Even as the last planes flew out, the base would never be permanent. The lessons learned would be applied to future military operations, but it was a reminder that nothing in war is certain, not even the ground beneath your feet. As the years passed, Operation Iceworm became more myth than memory. Yet the story of those 10 days of courage, innovation, and survival against the odds remained. It was a reminder that in the most extreme conditions, humanity's will to prevail can build something truly extraordinary. And perhaps, in the end, that's the greatest triumph of all.